Thank you, Secretary General Villegas. It's fun to be called a father. I'm not quite sure that I deserve that, but thank you very much. It's great to be back. You know, big special thanks to Ms. Hannah and Mr. Bouchard, the board, and everyone who's put work into this, setting up this conference. It looks great. Things are ready to go, and really looking forward to the debate today. You know, and also just a special thing before I start. There are a couple students here who were part of this when it was quite small and not as professional as we got going today. Paulo Martinez, Hansa Sanchez Equibar, and it's great that you guys are still involved. As many of you in the Marinos, the Campas, families that have been giving to this program for years and are still involved. It's fantastic. So for me, my journey in Mali United Nations started actually 30 years ago. I guess I can be called a father. I'm old enough, I guess. Yeah, it was 30 years ago that I attended my first MUN conference. I was a 9th grader. It was 1983, and I represented Israel. And prospects for peace back then were pretty grim in 1983. There had just been a suicide bombing inside Israel. 60 innocent civilians were killed. That was on the one hand, and on the other hand, Israel had just moved into some settlements, some permanent settlements on the West Bank, and land that many people thought was going to be land for a future Palestinian state. And prospects for peace were pretty grim. And here we are 30 years later, and just that scenario sounds kind of familiar, and really not a whole lot has changed in that situation. In those 30 years, at many multi-United Nations conferences, probably thousands of resolutions have been passed about trying to solve the problem in the Middle East. Probably thousands. And you start to think about, well, what if nothing's changed? What good are we doing? If in here we're kind of figuring out the solutions to peace, and we're working on it, and they're still fighting out there. What does it really matter then? I mean, as William Faulkner once said, is it all just the sound and the fury signifying nothing? Well, I'm here to tell you, it's not. No, it's not. It doesn't signify nothing at all. In fact, we have to ask ourselves why we're doing this. And recently, I think, for me, I was reminded of partly of why we're doing this. Something extraordinary happened in the United Nations recently. You guys may have heard about it. The General Assembly passed a resolution by a vote of 154 in favor, 3 against, with 23 abstentions. And this resolution creates a new arms treaty that regulates, for the first time ever in the history of the world, regulates the $70 billion arms trade that currently exists. And the genius of this treaty, in my mind, is that this treaty, it changes for the first time. It puts responsibility on the seller of weapons for what is done with the weapons by the buyer. And if this treaty gets ratified by the countries that did sign it, that did pass a resolution, now it needs to go back to the governments and they need to ratify it. But if it is ratified, things that are happening right now, for instance, the weapons that are being sold that you guys are going to be debating in part of your debate in the Security Council, weapons that are being sold to the Assad regime would be in violation of international law, and it would change that whole debate that's happening in the Security Council would actually no longer be an issue because this arms treaty would be in place and would prevent civilians from being fired upon. The thing I want to talk about this resolution, though, is not so much that, although it's a fascinating resolution, is the process. Because delegates, they lobbied this resolution for 7 years. For 7 years in the United Nations, they were lobbying. Think of that. Last night, you guys lobbied for an hour. And there was some good lobbying going on. It took them 7 years to get this through the United Nations. To get that 154-3 vote, it took them 7 years. And it needed to be 154 because, if people don't pass it, if people don't vote for it, it's not going to happen. It basically means they're not going to endorse it, right? So let's think about that. So what did they have? How many times in those 7 years did those delegates want to give up? how many times in those 7 years did those delegates have to try to meet some kind of roadblock from one particular country where they were upset about some nuance in the actual resolution? And why didn't they give up? I mean, how can you work on one thing for 7 years? Well, I think there's some reasons they didn't give up. One is because they believe that it could happen. They believe in that this treaty could actually happen. And secondly, they were willing to do the work to make it happen. Those two things, belief and the work. And if I may, I'd just like to pause and talk about something else real briefly. Something else that happened in 1983, besides my first MUN conference, that's kind of an interesting story. And that is that in 1983, some of you might have been following a college basketball tournament in the United States that just happened. So this is the 30-year anniversary of something that happened in 1983. In 1983, there was a small school called North Carolina State, and they barely made the tournament. There's a tournament of 64 teams. They barely made the tournament, but at that tournament, they upset teams that had some people you've probably heard of: Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler. They upset teams that had some of the best players ever to play basketball in the professional ranks. This small school beat them on the way to winning the national championship. It's one of the biggest upset stories in sport, maybe. And people afterwards, they talk to the coach and they say, like, where'd you guys come from? How'd you guys do this? What happened? And he talked about the fact that they believed in what they were doing, they believed they could win, and they were willing to do the work to make it happen. And then I sort of pushed them, they said, well, how did you make them believe? They said, well, we would have whole practices where instead of actually practicing basketball, all we would do is practice cutting down the nets. And some of you may have known this in college basketball, when you win a big championship or something, the players will hold each other on their shoulders, or they get a ladder, and they each snip down part of the basketball net, and that's sort of their ceremony of victory. And he said, we're going to practice doing that. So you know that when we become champions, you know what it's like. You know how to handle it. We're going to practice it because you guys are going to be champions. So they would practice that, and then they believed it. They believed that they could do it. So it's about belief and work. And when that team was down in those games, they believed that they could do it, so they fought their way back. Instead of giving up, they were relentless. And I think that's what you guys need to take into this weekend. For me, that's what this weekend's all about. It's about, this is sort of a practice for you in some ways, for life. I mean, every time you are able to find common ground on how to solve a problem from different perspectives, which is not easy, pass a resolution with popular support, you are practicing cutting down the nets. Every time you listen to the criticism of a resolution, and then you find a way to address those concerns by writing an amendment that strengthens that resolution, you're practicing cutting down the nets. That's what you're doing. Every time you make a good speech, a well-informed speech that challenges delegates to think critically about what's happening, that focuses on the roots of the problem and long-term solutions, you're practicing cutting down the nets. That's what you're doing. So that one day, after all this is over, years from now, when you're in a situation where people say, this can't be done, there's no way this is going to pass, let's give up on this. You have the skills from experiences like this, you have the skills, the dedication, the inspiration, and the skills to say, no, it can be done. In fact, let's do this. I can make it happen. And that's what this weekend's about. And so when you guys do that in the future, and it's gonna happen, I believe it's gonna happen. Many of you, I've already seen it with students who've gone on into college, there's students who've actually volunteered, done internships in the countries that they've represented at these United Nations conferences. That's how much you can carry this forward. And so when that does happen, all we ask as advisors is that you let us know, because that's our inspiration. When you guys keep in touch and you tell us about the things that you do down the road, just let us know, because we'd love to hear that. So good luck to you guys. Use this weekend to bring out the best that is in all of you. Okay? Thank you very much.